Chapter 11. The Nest of the Missel Thrush. For 2 or 3 minutes he stood looking round him while Mary watched him, and then he began to walk about softly, even more lightly than Mary had walked the first time she'd found herself inside those 4 walls. His eyes seemed to be taking in everything: the gray trees with the gray creepers climbing over them and hanging from their branches, the tangle on the walls and among the grass, the evergreen alcoves with the stone seats and the flower urns standing in them. "I never thought I'd see this place," he said at last in a whisper. "Do you know about it?" asked Mary. She had spoken aloud, and he had made a sign to her. "We must talk low," he said, "or someone will hear us and wonder what we're doing in here." "Oh, I forgot," said Mary, feeling quite frightened and putting her hand quickly against her mouth. "Do you know about this garden?" she asked again when she had recovered herself. Deacon nodded. "Martha told me there was one, as no one ever went inside," he answered. "Us used to wonder what it was like." He stopped and looked round at the lovely gray tangle about him, his eyes round and strangely happy. The nest as they'll be in here come springtime," he said. "It'd be the safest nesting place in England. No one never coming near, and tangles of trees and roses to build in. I wonder all the birds in the moor don't build their nest in here." Mistress Mary put her hand on his arm again without knowing it. "Will there be roses?" she whispered. "Can you tell? I thought perhaps they were all dead." No, not all of them. No, not all of them," he answered. "Look here." And he stepped over to the nearest tree, an old, old one, with gray lichen all over its bark, but upholding a curtain of tangled sprays and branches. He took a thick knife out of his pocket and opened up one of its blades. "There's lots of dead wood as ought to be cut out," he said, "and there's lots of old wood, but it made some new last year. This here's a new bit," he said, and he touched a shoot which looks brownish green instead of hard dry gray. Mary touched it herself in an eager, reverent way. "That one," she said, "is that one quite alive? Quite?" Deacon curved his wide, smiling mouth. "It's as wick as you or me," he said, and Mary remembered that Martha had told her that wick meant alive or lively. "Oh, I'm glad it's wick," she cried in her whisper. "I want them all to be wick. Let us go round the garden and count how many wick ones there are." She quite panted with her eagerness, and Deacon was as eager as she. They went from tree to tree and from bush to bush. Deacon carried his little knife in his hand and showed her things which she thought was wonderful. "They've run wild," he said, "but the strongest ones has fair thrived on it. The delicate ones has died out, but the others has growed and growed and spread till they's a wonder. See here," and he pulled down a thick, gray, dry-looking branch. "A body might think this was dead wood, but don't believe it. Down at the root, I'll cut it low down here and we'll see." He knelt with his little knife, and he cut the lifeless-looking branch through, not far above the earth. "There," he said exultantly, "I told thee so. There's green in that wood yet. Look at it." Mary was down on her knees before he spoke, gazing with all her might. "When it looks a bit greenish and kind of juicy like that, then it's wick," he explained. "When the inside is dry and it breaks easy, like this here piece I've cut off, it's done for. There's a big root here, and as all this live wood has sprung out of it. And if the old wood is cut off and it's dug around and took care of a bit, there'll be—" he stopped and he lifted his face to look. "There'll be a fountain of roses here this summer." They went from bush to bush and from tree to tree. He was very strong and clever with his knife, and he knew how to cut the dry and dead wood away. and he could tell when an unpromising bough or twig still had green life in it. In the course of half an hour, Mary thought she could tell too, and when he cut through a lifeless-looking branch, she would cry out joyfully under her breath when she caught sight of the least shade of moist green. The spade and hoe and fork were very useful. He showed her how to use the fork while he dug around roots with the spade and stirred the earth to let the air in. They were working industriously round one of the biggest standard roses when he caught sight of something which made him utter an exclamation of surprise. "Why," he cried, pointing to the grass a few feet away, "who did that there?" It was one of Mary's own little clearings round the pale green points. "I did it," said Mary. "Why, I thought thou didn't know nothing about gardening," he exclaimed. "I don't," she answered, "but they were so little, and the grass was so thick and strong, and it looked as if they had no room to breathe, so I made a place for them. I don't even know what they are." Deacon went, and he knelt down by them, smiling his wide smile. "Thou was right," he said. "A gardener couldn't have told thee better. They'll grow now, like Jack's beanstalk. They're crocuses and snowdrops, and these here are narcissus," turning to another patch, "and here's daffodillies. Ay, they will be a sight." He ran from one clearing to another. "Thou hast done a lot of work for such a little wench," he said, looking her over. I am growing fatter," said Mary, and I'm growing stronger. I used to always be tired. When I dig, I'm not tired at all. I like to smell the earth when it's turning up." "It's rare good for thee," he said, nodding his head wisely. "There's naught as nice as the smell of good clean earth, except the smell of fresh growing things. When the rain falls on 'em, I get out on the moor many a day when it's raining, and I lie under a bush, and I listen to the soft swish of drops on the heather, and I just sniff and sniff. My nose end fair quivers like a rabbit's, Mother says." "Don't you ever catch cold?" inquired Mary, gazing at him. She'd never seen such a funny boy, or such a nice one. "Not me," he said, grinning. "I never catched cold since I was born. I wasn't brought up nesh enough. I chased round the moor in all weathers, same as the rabbits does. Mother says I've sniffed up too much fresh air for 12 years to ever get to sniffing with a cold. I'm as tough as a white-thorn knobstick." He was working all the time he was talking, and Mary was following him and helping him with